Many thanks, Paul. Paul Hawkins there. It's 5:36. You're listening to Wake Up to Money with Jeremy Naylor and me, Mickey Clark. It's come too late for Cadbury, but today the Takeover Panel ends its consultation into the rules governing company mergers and acquisitions. The consultation could lead to the biggest rules shake-up in decades. The panel started looking into the rules following concerns that British companies were an easy target for predators wanting to make a quick buck. Well, Selina TheTakeover is a partner at the global law firm Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher and sat on the Takeover Panel from 2004 to 2006. She joins us now. Good morning, Selina.
Good morning, gentlemen.
I suppose it wasn't coincidental that the panel decided to revisit the takeover and merger rules after the hostile takeover of Cadbury's. It's almost as if Kraft cocked a snoot at the politicians, and that's something they don't want, isn't it?
Absolutely, but I think those who focus on the Kraft Cadbury takeover, I'm afraid, are really discussing old news and really need to focus on what the big issue and the real issue is here today in terms of the impact of the rule changes.
And what is the big issue?
A severe adverse impact potentially on the volume of M&A bids in the UK, and not just a perception, but the reality that the UK market, traditionally known as an open market, is going to become very closed and really deter not just foreign bidders, hostile bidders, but private equity. The impact of the rules potentially have wide consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this is a problem of our own making to a certain extent, in that we do have an open door policy. We do allow most people to come in and make a bid. All right, it's given a cursory glance, and if a company's not suitable, it's told it can't proceed. But unlike other countries such as France and Germany, we do allow overseas bidders to come in, and it's always been our policy. But if other countries don't reciprocate, what is the point of it?
There certainly is an issue of a level playing field, but is the solution to close the markets down within the UK? London is known as a sophisticated financial centre. Hostile bids and recommended bids do have, in many occasions, a positive impact. Who should be making the decisions on this? Is it shareholders or is it politicians? In the majority of cases, we've trusted the free market system and shareholders to decide on whether or not the price is right.
Because, I mean, if you look at the utility industry, for instance, electricity, water, many of them now are owned by the French or the Germans, and yet if British companies wanted to do the same thing, they'd probably be blocked.
They're probably blocked. We know very well about the national interest the French had in yogurt, which we laughed about, but I'm afraid we seem to be cruising down that line rapidly. But the other thing we need to understand is, if you look at the shareholder register of utility industries today, or even companies like Kraft, it's changed. We no longer own the majority of our companies. 40 to 50% of some of our largest companies, in fact, are held by overseas shareholders, activists, hedge funds. And that is a sad truth, perhaps, but it's just a recognition of the increasingly smaller world that we live in.
I mean, looking at it from the other angle, of course, is that, we've done a great deal of investing in other countries, such as the US, without any problems at all. I mean, much of the US is owned by British investors.
Absolutely. And one of the key statistics that people forget is that in the last 10 years, British companies on a net basis have bid for more foreign companies than we have been bid for. And that's an important point to remember.
So what changes do you see being made to accommodate all this?
Well, the changes that are coming, I'm afraid, swing the balance heavily in favour of the boards of target companies and give them a tactical weapon which potentially has an impact on the ease at which foreign bids, hostile bids, as I said, and private equity bids can be launched. The advisory community have a real concern about this. On the plus side, yes, there is increased disclosure and transparency, which is being encouraged by the panel. That's a good thing. There are some parts of the profession who are concerned that we're being inundated and flooded with too much information. Will we be able to discern exactly what's useful in the context of a bid or not? I understand why the panel are doing this. They are fearful that the politicians are going to start redrafting the rules. But people like me and the rest in the advisory community are also concerned about the real impact in practice on the bids. And perhaps the panel is choosing weapons of which are not suitable for the issue at hand.
So there's a danger they could overstep the mark.
Absolutely.
Let's bring our markets guest in on this. James Bevan, Chief Investment Officer at CCLA. James, good morning to you. It's an interesting point. Is the issue here the fact that it's not a level playing field? Are you fearful that politicians are going to get involved in all this? Where do you stand as an investor?
I think that if we were to look back at the mergers and acquisitions activities in recent years, we can discern two rather different strands. One has been a strand of commercial logic, where there has been a clear potential benefit for shareholders, for customers, and for broader business participants and stakeholders. And that's great, and I think that anything that draws back the capacity to add value that way will be a retrograde step. In contrast, the other strand of M&A activity that grew up in recent years was one based on financial engineering, buying a company, gearing its balance sheet with bags of leverage, and I've seen a lot of that in the utility sector, and actually just raising the risk profile of the business for the benefit of a relatively narrow set of shareholders. And he's absolutely right, we should be very careful about those
Is this one company over here doing awfully well over there? Is that what you're referring to?
No, that was absolutely fine, but if one looked at the current ownership structure of the UK utility sector, for example, and you totted up the amount of borrowed money which now is required to maintain those businesses, it is very frightening. This
is the problem, isn't it, Selina? The fact that there is a lot of short-termism here, isn't there? And there's not a lot of long-term thinking, perhaps, maybe, in some of these takeovers. Is that the problem?
Short-term greed?
Short-term greed is certainly an issue, but it's not, from my perspective, it's not really the role of the panel, and that's what they've said, to actually decide on the commercial merits of a bid. The panel's there to ensure that there's transparency in the market and that there's order in the conduct of takeover activity. I think the point that you're making is that we do see over-leveraged bids, particularly well known in the private equity industry, and the impact of that going forward on boards of companies. Now, some of the rules will flush this issue out, in part because they're encouraging enhanced disclosure on the financing structures of bids. But I think the market's already addressed that in part. It's become very expensive to borrow. Covenant-light leveraged bids are no longer, we're not going to see that anymore, not for a long while.
And the culture of just making bids for the sake of growing, if you like, buying sales, has been scuppered along with the banking crisis, isn't it? I mean, it's so expensive to go in and borrow money now just to do that.
Absolutely. That having been said, there are a number of large conglomerates and corporates which are sitting with a huge cash balance on their balance sheets, looking for targets to pick up on the cheap. But we haven't seen that kind of volume of bid activity from that part of the market as yet.
One of our regular texters, Eddie from North Nibley's coming. He said at takeovers, never mind the selfish shareholders, let's protect the jobs of key workers. What is the purpose of the takeover panel here? It is to look at the companies, the potential shareholders, jobs. What is it?
The role of the panel is actually quite narrowly defined, but quite precise, which is simply to look at the interest of the shareholders of the target company. There are other rules and regulations.
So forget the jobs, forget the loss of livelihoods, whatever it might be, as a consequence of a takeover.
Jobs are collateral damage, in other words.
It's for other parts of the market. It's for employment regulation. It's for the Europeans. That's not the role of the panel. And unfortunately, we've seen a bit of a mudding of the waters recently.
Okay, many thanks for that. That was Selina TheTakeover, partner at global law firm Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. That's a marvellous name.
Slightly unfortunate, Crutcher.
Very Dickensian. Yes. Now let's take a look at this morning's business.